Hoping we are live. And I know that there are folks out there that are joining us. And I hope everybody's doing well tonight. I am loving the cool weather we're having up in the Northeast and enjoying it because I know summer is coming. But I wanted to talk to you tonight about, man, just some really, really alarming things that are going on. And I hope and pray that everyone is staying safe in the middle of all the stuff that's going on around us. I got to tell you, I've never really seen the stuff that I'm seeing now happening in our country. I am shocked by the number of things that are happening. And I think as we have more joining us, and I think this is really a critical point into our nation, right now. It's truly shocking as you watch the number of events, not just in the U.S. Welcome, Bless 117. It's good to see you. Thank you for jumping in. But I wanted to talk to you tonight. For those that don't know me, I had a very blessed career. Was a Marine officer and was able to kind of deploy. But then I was a Secret Service agent. And then after 9/11, I worked with the Department of Homeland Security. And actually, to be honest, after 9/11, we were kind of trying to weigh all the threats and protect the American people. I was assigned to the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, and it was really, a critical time. But we really did, try with all of our heart to protect the American people. And so tonight I wanted to come on and I wanted to talk to you about all the events that are going on, but of particular concern. Now, I want to backtrack just a little bit. After 9/11, I was assigned to the FBI. I viewed all the threats. I sat in with many of the director's briefs. And I must tell you that in my total career, I've never, and I was working with all the different agencies, and I'll leave it at that. Seeing all the material at the classified level, and I've never seen the kinds of information coming out from the FBI that we're seeing now. And it's very troubling to me. And I wanted to bring this to your attention because, folks, we've got to know, we've got to be aware of kind of the condition of our country. And for many of you, it may not matter that you're seeing, this event or that event. But when you start putting things together, and for those of you that know me, I'm not an alarmist. I'm simply trying to be a truth teller and to encourage Americans to prepare. Because now, folks, right now, today, this week, this month, is the time to prepare. Now, I want you to hear what Director Wray said today in front of Congress. Now, let me get a little bit of a backstop to it. Prior to this, I think it's 5 times in the last 3 months, he's used the term red lights flashing. Folks, I want you to understand, the FBI director doesn't come on and say things like this without substantial background investigative information that tells him. And I don't want to say that it's a CYA, but it's a CYA. He is covering himself because they have information, a lot of information, that the perfect storm is upon America. And I just want to communicate to you again, for us as Americans that love our country, that love our neighbors, want to be part of the solution, now, please hear me. Now is the time to respond and to prepare. And I know many of you are going to say, hey, what do we do? And I'm happy to kind of talk through that. But I want you to hear the director's statement first. Listen carefully to what Director Ray said today regarding all that's going on.
Never seen a time where all the threats, or so many of the threats, are all elevated all at exactly the same time. I see blinking lights everywhere I turn. It's the first time I've seen in a long, long time the threats from extremists, that is, jihadist-inspired extremists, domestic violent extremists, foreign terrorist organizations, and state-sponsored terrorist organizations all being elevated at one time. Since October 7th, though, that threat has gone to a whole nother level. And so this is a time, I think, for much greater vigilance than has maybe been called upon of us before October 7th.
Folks, I'm sure you all watching the news are astute and paying attention. I don't know if you heard him, everything. Sometimes with the phone, it's hard to hear. He said he's never seen a time where all of the threats are elevated to the point where they are. And that's concerning because he kind of is at the top of the tier as the FBI director in terms of evaluating threats against our nation. And I think, part of what that should do for us, when you have an FBI director say, I've never seen the level of threats, then for all of us, we should say, hey, okay, we hear you. What are we going to do? Now, he talked about domestic terrorism, talked about international terrorism. What he didn't mention specifically, which he did talk about 3 days ago, was what he termed as an imminent potential cyber attack from Chinese players. Now, we all know that Chinese players mean the government of China. They won't acknowledge that, but there are Chinese hackers that have targeted critical infrastructure in our nation, meaning that if you think of things like power grids, you think of our air transportation industry, you think of water filtration, you think of what we saw this last week in 911 centers across 3 states being taken down. Folks, this is not coincidence. If you think over the last couple years, there's been unexplained interruptions in our critical infrastructure. And and Director Ray was unashamed at saying, hey, I think we are at risk of our entire society in the United States being disrupted to a point where it could cause civil crisis and disorder. And so, folks, I just want to really encourage you in this season of our country that you're really thinking about the golden question that we train, and that's what would I do if? What would I do if? And welcome, to everybody. Shirley, it's good to see you. And I think we're really in a season now where we ought to ask ourselves critical questions like, what would I do if there was no food available at the grocery store? What would I do if? Because if you think about it, a cyber attack could, interdict the transportation industry. There's so many things that are run literally by cyber, by computers, and the fact that the Chinese government now can access our vital, critical infrastructures. It appears like, they can do it at will, but then to have the FBI director come on and really caution, warn, hey, red lights flashing, that really should cause us to go, well, wait a minute, this is serious. And it really does create a problem. Kelly, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining us. So the question is, what would I do if I don't have a supply of food for however long a period. Some of what I encourage people to do is basically to look online. There's Wise Food, there's Patriot Food. It's good for 25 years. But really ask yourself, how long could my family sustain itself if there was an interruption in the food supply? And that's the first thing that I encourage everybody who's thinking of preparing. And folks, I know you know this. It wasn't too terribly long where preppers were weird. But now it is genuinely something that every family should consider. So food is number one, and then clean water is another thing. We need to have clean water. Do you have filtration capabilities? For many that live out in the country, this is not so big of a deal. But if you live in the city, do you have the ability to sustain yourself with clean water? Because we know over time, and again, going back to Director Ray's point, if water filtration plants are a target of a cyber attack, what happens to people that desperately need water every day? And so food and water, and then, the security of your homes. We've talked about this. I'm going to go into more detail for how to protect yourself in your home in the days ahead. I just think it's critical that we understand that many police agencies today are under strength. They're struggling to get recruits in, and then something happens, and those resources are drained away. And so, in the middle of a substantial crisis, you may be your own security. And so, what does the security of your home look like? And by that, I'm talking about door security. During my career, I probably kicked in quite a few doors, and it was just easy with 90+% of the houses that we were making legal entry into. And it really caused me to go, well, wait a minute here. If I can kick it, then someone else can. And so it goes to the door security, the window security. Do you have external video cameras? Those kinds of things, because remember, again, food, water, shelter. But then number four, how do you protect yourself in a potentially growing level of potential violence or unrest or even anarchy? Because again, when I hear the director of the FBI say red lights flashing, having been there, having worked in that environment, having processed that information, it's very problematic, folks. And so one of the things I always encourage folks to, to think about, before a crisis is, how do I prepare? But then now it's an urgent thing. It's, hey, we better start thinking about this now. Because can you imagine, if Director Ray is correct and there are systematic and unified attacks against the United States, can you imagine the anarchy that will follow, and then the desperation of people who have not prepared and who are really struggling to survive in that environment? And so, I just wanted to come on tonight and just really encourage you to think about, what would I do if these things are true? Because here's the good news. If these things aren't true and it's hype or it's the government or whatever, you hear a lot of stuff out here. But if it's not true and you're prepared, you still win. But if it's true and you're unprepared, that is that's a formula for disaster. And especially if you have a family with children, and now is the time for wisdom and preparation, because we really don't understand what's behind the FBI director's clear. I mean, I've never heard language like this coming from the director of the FBI. And he hasn't done it just what he did it today, but he's done it like 4 different times. He's talked about cybersecurity. He's talked about the risk of October 7th style attacks. And in the U.S., and folks, I know, I don't have to tell you about how open our borders have been. The level of evil that has crossed into our home in America is unparalleled. We've never seen that level of I mean, think about it. Prisons being emptied, violent criminals being expelled from countries right into our backyard. And so, hey, Matt, it's good to see you. Thank you for jumping in. So I think we really are at a point, folks, and that's the purpose of this video, is to say, what are you doing to prepare? When you hear the FBI director say, hey, at red lights flashing, we're going to have an attack on America. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, 1941, U.S., at Pearl Harbor. We had all kinds of information, suggesting that there was going to be a problem. The Japanese were going to potentially attack. And yet we didn't prepare. We had planes on the runways. We had ships not at sea. And the disaster. And then, again on 9/11, the disaster that occurred, the intelligence failures that led to 3,000 people dying. Well, folks, I have to tell you, and again, it's not an alarmist thing. It's when I hear the FBI director say red lights flashing, and then he goes a step further and he talks about cybersecurity that's going to potentially cripple key infrastructure, which, folks, that's now, imagine how long you could go without power if the extended power outage was months and or even years, because systematic strikes at our power grid, which is very vulnerable, could result in tremendous chaos. And that's where, again, we go back to limited police resources. Now they're going to have to care for their families. And so it really is incumbent upon us. And I like that thought. You either prepare or you panic. That's right, Matt. We really have a time period unlike any we've lived in this country. And I think now is the time, going back to those four things. What are the four things you have to have? You have to have food. Well, I saw an advertisement this week, Patriot Food lasts for 20 years. They don't sponsor me or anything, but it lasts 25 years. Well, so what if you bought some of it? What if you sacrificed and had a food stash? And then what about water? How do you store water? How do you filter water? Because that's a huge issue. If you live in a place with a well, great, as long as you have power or a generator to get water out of that well or a hand pump. But and then you talk about the security of your shelter, because, folks, remember, if you have it and others don't, you have to be prepared to defend it. And those are the kinds of things, folks, that make the difference between the victims and the victors. And as you think through the days that we live in, I want to be prepared. I want to be a prepared victor, not the victim that is like, wow, I should have, could have, would have. And so that includes your personal security as well, because it's not just at home. Nobody's just going to lock themselves at home and hunker down. You're going to have to go out. So that goes to, your self-defense training. What kind of self-defense training do you have? What kinds of training do you have with tools of any kind? Whether it's pepper spray, whether it's a hand tool, whether it's a weapon. Do you have the things in place to protect yourself and your family? And again, folks, I get mocked sometimes, for, oh, you're an alarmist and whatever. I'd much rather be a truth teller to folks that I care for, which is you, than I wouldn't, would be, the person that just remains, to myself and tries to build a channel. And let me ask you this too, folks, if you would, because if you have questions or whatever, please feel free to fire them out. But the channel itself obviously is growing thanks to you. Many good people have recommended, that others come to the channel, which I'm thankful for. But I'm also being told that, and I've never experienced this, that those have tried to subscribe and gotten an error message. and some that did subscribe have been unsubscribed. And I think this has kind of happened. Hi, Debbie. It's good to see you. I think it's happening to a lot of conservative channels, but I desperately need your help because I think all of us need this kind of information. We all need, number one, to hear truth amongst the hype. There's a lot of hype out here. So if you would, if you'd always like, share, subscribe, and then comment, that helps me to get things out, because I do think, folks, it's time for us to get serious, and I think anybody on the conservative side with faith is going to fight somewhat of an uphill battle to get it out. So I do think, folks, just to recap, the FBI director's message today was incredibly concerning to me. Again, for I think the fifth time, he came out and said, which was today, it was like red lights flashing, flashing. He was talking about all the threats coming together, the domestic challenges that we're having with violent, anti-Semitic protests across the country, in concert with the cyber threat from the Chinese, which is very overt and clear, in concert with I know from some friends that they are waiting in anticipation of similar, extremist attacks in the U.S., similar to what we saw October 7th. And quite frankly, I think it's going to shock us if these things are presented in all at a timed type of attack. And so I think that, again, for us, we don't want to be fearful. I don't want to live my life fearful. I certainly want to live my life wise and prepared. Even if you have the ability to store some fuel, if you think of simple things, we lived in Florida, and when you're coming up on a big hurricane, you realize stuff may not be available for a while, just based on the kind of storm, where it hits, all that stuff. So I would challenge you to think in that way. What would I need to survive even 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even more? Given a systematic and consistent attack against our homeland. And again, we've not faced this. And so I hope and pray that you're thinking in this way. I really hope that you are preparing in this way. And most importantly, I hope you're praying. Because I think right now our country is in serious trouble. When I think of the direction we're going in many, many areas, thanks, James. It's good to see you, brother. I appreciate it. I think we really, are going to be tested, I think. And so let me also encourage you, when you get under pressure and you begin to experience these things, your physical body and your mental health are affected. So, take time now to really, get out there, walk, get as healthy as you can. My friend Matt and I were talking just about the importance of physical fitness as you face these challenges and crisis periods. Get out and get into a walking, a workout, a weightlifting, a defensive tactics type program, because now is the time. And so I just wanted to come on and literally encourage you. I hope it's not discouraging you, but also I always want to tell you the truth. The bottom line is, now is the time to prepare. And I think, again, if we're the ones that are prepared, we're the ones that are going to be a blessing to others. And that's the purpose of why I do what I do. And so I hope and pray this is helpful to you. Thank you for your comments and encouragement. It always spurs me on. We're going to be doing some things in the days ahead, talking about specific things you can do to harden your home, and specific things you can do if are going to be traveling. Let me just say this too, and then I'm going to wrap up here, unless folks have specific questions. If you're traveling internationally now, you need to do it anonymously. And what I mean by that is, do not necessarily broadcast the fact that you're an American across Europe, across key places. The anti-American sentiment is rising. And so what does that mean, Tim? Well, it means when you travel, don't wear clothing associated with the US. You're careful that you're paying attention, you're alert, you're observant, because those are the kinds of things that allow you to remain visually anonymous, is what I call, that you're not drawing attention to yourself. You're actually the opposite. You're kind of flowing and you're fitting in. When you look at Americans being discouraged from traveling to certain locations, it's very evident that the anti-American sentiment, which blows me away, that it's all because we're supportive of Israel, and I am unashamedly supportive of Israel. And I can't imagine someone telling me after the attack on 9/11 that we couldn't go out and take care of the folks that did that to our people. So with that said, I am grateful for you guys jumping on. I'm going to be doing more lives in the days ahead. They're just very, helpful to interact, and I really appreciate your support. And again, if you guys would help me with the channel, I'm going to be putting out some videos here soon. But if you would just, like, share, subscribe, because it's discouraging when, you work hard to put the content out, and then whatever it is, I'm not blaming YouTube, but being unsubscribed, not being able to see the full audience, I don't think is overly helpful to the people I want to serve. So I really do. That was a great point, Francis, by the way. Also, the accent is a giveaway. So remember that when you're in places, especially foreign, your accent can communicate that you're an American. And I'm not saying don't talk, you have to talk, but you also need to be mindful that anything that identifies you as an American, especially in certain places, can put you on the skyline. And so your apparel, your also, and I know you've heard this, I talk to my friend Chuck Holton all the time. When you're trying, and I think Chuck gets a few air miles in last time I checked, but we talk often about, hey, when he's in very dangerous places, just the value of being situationally alert and aware. And the way we describe it is a head on a swivel. You're paying attention. I think, the bottom line is, wherever we are, because recently a friend of mine who traveled into a very, very dangerous place came back and he said, I got to tell you, I felt safer over there than I did walking down the street in downtown Baltimore. And folks, that's a sad comment on where our country is going. And so I think, we have to be the ones that are prepared. We have to be the ones not only prepared for ourselves, but prepared to help others. Life is short. Serving others is the way of a truly valuable life. And so I hope this stuff is helpful. Oh, that's good too. I just gave my sister an RFID blocking sleeve for her passport as she goes to Europe. That's another. It's interesting how, which is what Director Ray was talking about, the physical threats, the terrorist threats, and the electronic threats today. Cyber, ransomware. And see, the problem is if those folks are able to access critical infrastructure with all kinds of cybersecurity guards, then in place, then that means they can definitely, get into your business computers and those kinds of things. And the rising tide of violence, crime, terrorism, cyber threats, and then you have the international war front that kind of keeps us all a little bit on edge. It's an interesting time to live. Kelly, that's right. You work in Baltimore. God bless you. I know that's kind of an interesting challenge every day, but knowing the little bit I know about you, I know you're prepared and ready. So, folks, I hope this is helpful for you. I really do. And if you would, again, just kind of help me get the message out, because there are a whole lot of good people out here that, the challenges are many, but the good news is, again, for people of faith, we trust that we're not alone, and that's helpful. That reminds me, I've been in some pretty dark, dangerous places in my career, but I've never felt alone, and so that's what keeps me going. But it's interesting too. That's a great comment on the phone. The phone constantly spying on me. Yeah, and the GPS locators, folks. Yeah, I'm just going to tell you the truth. Phones are easily used as devices. Now you have to have some level of sophistication, but phones can easily monitor a lot of things. Alexa, phones, smartwatches, and those are things you should consider. Your computers all have speakers and cameras for a reason, and so those are that's another thing that you need to think about in terms of your personal security, because your plan is your plan, and I hope and pray that your plan is growing and being developed and adding, information to and changing, because that's the thing with a plan, folks. We're just going to have to be all in this season, and it's not fear, it's wisdom and preparation. And that's a good point too, on the blocking sleeves for your phone. You can block signals to your phone, and the geolocation aspect of your phone is problematic. Meaning, if the wrong people were able to hack into your phone, they would know your location all the time. And so that's another great point. But folks, you're making great points. I don't want to, run these out, but I really do appreciate all of you for jumping on, spending time with me. I hope and pray that we can continue to do these things. Again, if you could help me, get the message out, that would be fantastic. And I really do hope and pray you all are staying safe, and that you all, you're not getting caught into, like Matt says, you don't get caught into panic. You get caught up in preparation, because that's how we all want to live. We want to enjoy this life. We want to do the things we were created to do, but we just want to do it safely. And I am very appreciative, especially for many of you who have just been faithful to follow me. So God bless you. Be careful out there, and we will see you soon and see you next time. Take care. Stay safe.